There are two mentalities that I want to talk about today, and both can be described as all abilities are spells. The first, of course, is something that I've brought up before. At least I'm pretty sure I brought it up before. Someone who's looking at, say, 4th edition character, 4th edition player's handbook, any 4th edition class, and they see ability after ability after ability after ability. Powers, because every class has powers. And they're all basically formatted the same way because they're all interacting with the same rule set. They exist in the same set of mechanics, and so they are formatted similarly. And they think, well, if the wizard has a bunch of powers, and those are their spells, and the fighter has a bunch of powers, well, those must be spells too. And they say, well, 4th edition just made all classes into spellcasters, and so they're all really samey. Like, the fighter is just a spellcaster, because all they're doing is casting spells. And this is the obviously erroneous idea that any kind of special ability must be a spell. Which is why they ascribe spellness to the fighter's powers. It is really telling, I think, to that kind of person's mentality, their approach to game design, that just because a class has special abilities, those are automatically categorized as spells. When in fact, there's no reason to categorize it that way. I'm trying to think of a counterexample, and the words are not coming to mind, because honestly, in the RPG design space, there aren't a lot of really good terms for special abilities that are not spells, probably because this has been the prevailing mentality for so long, starting from the 70s and working their way up into the 80s and even into the 90s, and even into the early 2000s, I think. Could be wrong on that, but I think the idea that not just spellcasters get special abilities is relatively new to RPGs. And I say relatively, I mean like within the last 15, 20 years. And so this kind of person seems to, or a person adopting this mentality. I don't want to paint broad strokes. But if you are engaging in this mentality, then you think that if a class has a special, powerful ability, it's an active use, you spend your action to do this thing, that is basically a spell. Especially if the system is set up so that all abilities are formatted on the page more or less the same way, which is really just a formatting thing. I think it's quite silly to ascribe qualities to a rule just because of the way it is written, when in fact they kind of they're written similarly for ease of reading. You can make an ability look different. You can write it a different way, but if every ability is written in a different way, that makes it really, really hard to parse those rules because there's no uniformity to them. So that's number one. Number two is the mentality that it feels like Jeremy Crawford and what few designers remain at Wizards of the Coast. I don't know how big their team is anymore. I can imagine it can't be very big. What they seem to approach the game with, which is this idea that anything that is a special ability should be a spell. And this is becoming more obvious as we see more of the previews of the 2024 Player's Handbook for 5th edition, or 5th edition 2nd edition, as I like to call it, 5e 2nd edition. And we're seeing that more features are being turned into spells. Now, this is a little bit different in 5th edition because whether or not something is a spell actually matters. There are rules that apply to spells that don't apply to other abilities in this game. Which means that, for example, a paladin's divine smite is now a spell. It can be countered. It can be prevented by anti-magic. Anything that interacts with spells, let's say a paladin is doing a divine smite next to a mage slayer. Well, that mage slayer is going to get an opportunity attack on you because you're casting a spell, whereas they wouldn't have before. And I kind of, on the one hand, I kind of understand wanting to move mechanics into this like design space that you have created that has a lot of structure to it. Because as I've said before, basically all of 5e's complexity is in the spellcasting system. You have like a whole 2 chapters in the 2014 Player's Handbook that is just about casting spells. There's a lot of rules involved. There's a lot of individual effects that don't have any support in any other place in the book, which is why near any non-spell feature tends to be pretty simple. You can describe it in a couple of paragraphs at most. No, not at most. There are some more complicated features, but most features outside of spellcasting are pretty short and pretty simple because they kind of have to be. There's no other mechanical hooks that you can hang these mechanics on. So I understand the desire to make it a spell because that puts it into this well-organized box, and then you can more easily understand how it works, when you can use it, what are the limitations. I understand wanting to do that. The issue then comes down to the more you move special abilities into becoming spells, the more it feels like everyone's kind of becoming a wizard, you know? Because the connotations of being a spell in 5th edition are a little bit different than in other games. Because, you have your vocal and somatic components, which means you are chanting magic words, you are waving your hand. I haven't seen the actual spell itself for Divine Smite. I have to assume it's vocal components only, because otherwise you would literally need to have a feat to use it if you're doing sword and board, because you can't cast spells with your hands full. That would be funny, actually. Oh, man. Can you imagine how much I'm going to laugh if Divine Smite comes out with somatic components as a requirement? That would be so funny. Anyways, no, but like it is like spellcasting as a system for 5th edition was really designed with like wizards in mind, wizards, sorcerers, where you're going to be going, abracadabra, and you're doing like the hand motion, like you are casting a spell, you are a spellcaster. And then then you have classes like Paladin, which sort of like they are magical martial characters. You're primarily using a weapon and you're using magic to enhance your combat ability. You're not really traditionally casting spells in the same way, not conceptually, but you do have to follow the rules of spellcasting. So you have to use your vocal and somatic components. You can't cast with both your hands full if it has somatic components. Which I touched on in my video on components. And sort of related to that is this idea, the fact that being a spell comes with a lot of mechanical baggage to it. So between these two mentalities, which both can be described as all features are spells, so any kind of like powerful special ability should be a spell, or anything that is a powerful special ability is a spell, even if not in name. Sort of like by definition, anything powerful is a spell automatically. These are different mentalities. They're related, but they are not like mutually inclusive. But they are both described as all special features are spells. And I reject both of them. Both of these, I think, are flawed ideas about game design, character design, the whole bit. I think it's important to have powerful special abilities that are not spells, because the fantasy of the warrior is a very strong one, and it deserves to have a place in our games. The fighter, the barbarian, the monk. The monk has supernatural abilities, certainly. They are not just a regular, they're not the guy from your karate class. They are a wuxia? I'm not sure I've ever said that word out loud before. Anyways, you know, they are the kung fu master from kung fu movies, you know, where they're doing impossible things. They are clearly supernatural, but they're not casting spells. And I think sort of devolving everything that is in any way arguably unrealistic into a spell is a really big problem. And I think turning it into an actual spell in the mechanics is a problem. And then also sort of deciding that anything that you couldn't do in real life is a spell, that is also problematic for a different reason entirely. The latter actually, I think, might be more damaging to the game design community as a whole, because it sort of precludes the idea that you can have non-magical characters that do anything cool and special and awesome and powerful. And I think that's problematic for a number of reasons. I think that, yeah, I think I hate that more than I hate Jeremy Crawford's insistence that every special feature needs to be moved over into being a spell. In the 1 D&D playtest, there was a period where wizards literally had to cast a spell to put a spell in their spellbook. You know, like that's how far this did go previously. We will see how much of that has been reverted. It is yet to be seen as of the recording of this video. Yeah, we'll see if basic wizard features that pertain to like learning and preparing spells become spells themselves. All right, so yeah, all features are spells. Either way you look at it, either way you interpret that statement, both a problem, and I think both are damaging to the game design community as a whole.